Hello there, I'm Nathalia Melo, your unfiltered fit BFF. Mom of two turned CEO of a fitness empire. Someone who truly understands the struggles of trying to stay fit, sane, and sexy, all while juggling work, life, and motherhood. And this is the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. Follow along wherever you're listening and join me weekly as I help busy working moms just like you simplify your fitness journey so you can lose fat, regain your confidence, and feel sexy AF. It's time to stop living in the what ifs and hiding from the cameras. It's time to regain control over your body, feel sexy naked, and wear a bikini confidently. People already see you as a super confident woman, but it's time for you to feel the same way too. Come on, let's go. Hello there, fam. Welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. I'm Nathalia Melo, your host, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that is hot right now. I'm going to be the first one to say that for a long time, I thought that this conversation was a bit of BS. I thought that it was, just excuses, blah, 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 until I got there. And the reason why I didn't really listen or kind of played it off is because I find nobody ever allows us to celebrate where we are in life. And I know that you're going to relate with this. It's like, if you are dating and you look good and you're about to get married, it's like, wait until you get married. And then you get married and then it's like, wait until you have a kid. And then you have a kid and it's like, wait until you hit your 30s. If you get married and have kids before your 30s. And then wait until you have your second kid and then you have the second kid. And it's like, it's always that waiting game. Like you can never enjoy where you're at and celebrate. So that always pissed me off. So, and for the longest time, whenever people would tell me, wait until you get to your 40s, I'm like, whatever, just excuse. And as I've gotten to my 40s and going to be turning 41 very soon, do I think that there is still a lot of using the age and the hormonal changes as a scapegoat to not do what needs to be done consistently? Yes, I do. Kind of like how I talk in many of the previous episodes, especially I think it was about 4 or 5 episodes ago, where I was talking about controlling what you can. It is very true that the hormonal change starts to impact you as you start to get a bit older, like in your 40s. And I know that I'm not yet in, full menopause or anything like that, but I'm just sharing that I'm seeing very subtle, nothing kind of crazy, but noticing. But again, this conversation today isn't about using age or using hormonal changes as a scapegoat to just throw your hands up in the air and be like, see, that's it. My hormones, I'm getting old. That's it. I'm just going to be, fluffy and sassy. And that's it. I mean, if you want to be fluffy and sassy, by all means, knock yourself out. I ain't stopping you. I get it. Girl, you do you, boo. But if you want to get lean or stay lean around your 40s, 50s, 60s, this episode today is for you because today I'm going to be sharing 7 tips to getting and staying lean after 40. And this is coming from my own personal experience and, using even some of wrong impressions that I had on how the hormonal change actually does impact you. I don't recover like I used to. There is a little bit more tiredness. And sometimes I just want to sit on the couch and be like, oh my God, don't bother me. Which I used to be somebody who was always like very bouncy around and like full of energy. And, it can be the hormones. It can be a bigger work demand. It can be a number of things. But these changes have also coincided with me turning 40. And I have been able to maintain leanliness. Is this a word? I just made a word. So stay with me here. And we work with a lot of women who are perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal. We've worked with members that were well into their 70s. We have members who are in their 60s. We have members who are in their 50s. So this is not only taking from my own personal experience, because that's the thing. Personal experience is great, but everybody's going to be different. And that's the problem that I have a lot of times when, fitness professionals are just like talking about their one trick pony, just about what worked for them. Oh, keto worked for me, therefore everybody needs to do keto, in which that's not really how it works. So, and that's the beauty about having worked with over 5,000 women, because we do have a very big database of strategies and how the body responds. And a lot of the ladies that we work with now are perimenopausal and menopausal and having some hormonal changes. So today I'm going to be talking to you about 7 tips to getting and staying lean after 40. And here's one thing that we need to keep in mind before we even get into the tips is that women typically start losing lean mass, aka muscle, in a process that is called sarcopenia in their late 30s or early 40s. And the gradual decline accelerates even more with age, especially after menopause. So what this means is that we start to lose muscle, lean mass, as we age, and that process is called sarcopenia. And just so we can stay on the same page here are like the key milestones for lean mass loss, give and take. There are no absolutes, because now the conversation around perimenopause, menopause is becoming much more open and available. And there are more researches that are being done, but we still have a long way to go. I think that the fact that we are having open conversations about perimenopause and menopause, and, I was even talking with my husband, which I think that is something that, my mom probably never would talk to my stepdad about, but it is changes that will happen with my body. And, I was having this conversation with my husband because it is something that is going to happen. But I think for a long time, there was this, I don't want to call a facade because it wouldn't be the right word, but this need for women to be almost like perfect and like young forever. And then that's it. And then we couldn't talk about the things like pelvic floor health and perimenopause and peeing when you jump after having kids. These conversations are becoming a lot more common. Although these things, like peeing when you jump after having kids, is common, it's not normal. We can talk about this another day. But here are some key age milestones for lean mass loss. Early 30s to 40s, muscle mass begins to decline slowly at a rate of about 3 to 5% per decade. And women who are less physically active will probably experience a more noticeable reduction of their muscle mass. Okay. So early 30s to 40s, about 3 to 5% per decade. And if you're not physically active, that can be even more. Then after 50, the rate of muscle loss tends to accelerate after menopause, typically around 50s and 60s. And this is because of hormonal changes, especially with the decrease of estrogen, which plays a role in maintaining muscle mass and strength. So at age 50, 60, it really accelerates. And then late 60 and beyond, muscle mass becomes more pronounced in women at age 60 and above with a steeper decline. And then if resistance training or strength building activities are not part of the routine, it's even worse. Because whenever we're talking about muscle in aging, I think for a long time, there was that talk that, muscle is just from an aesthetics standpoint. Especially for me, as I age, I'm starting to see things also from a different perspective. It's not just, do I like having a six pack? Damn right I do. Do I like having like capped shoulders and, muscle showing? Absolutely. Love it. Big fan. One thing that for a long time I didn't think about was the functionality of having muscle as we age, because muscle is almost what is going to, quote unquote, guarantee us some kind of quality of life. The ability to sit down and get up, the ability to play with my kids and my grandkids and hopefully my great grandkids, and to have the strength to pull myself up if I fall. We need to start doing something sooner rather than later. And that's why, whenever I have conversations with women and they're always talking about waiting, especially as they haven't been really physically active. And there is always something that they believe is a bigger priority than taking care of their bodies. Oh, because we're doing something in the house. Oh, I need to get a new car. Oh, my kids are going to college. Yeah, you're paying for your kids to go to college, but then you're not going to be able to enjoy that because you're going to be frail and falling apart because you haven't taken care of your body. So these are conversations that we have to start having right now, because it is not just about looking a certain way, but it's also about securing your muscle mass for quality of life in the future. So what are my tips to getting and staying lean after 40? What has worked for me? And not only for me, that's what I'm seeing across the board with all the ladies that we work with. Tip number one is prioritize protein with every meal. Protein supports muscle maintenance, and it also helps with satiety, in which is going to help you regulate your hunger, higher protein, and also is going to help you preserve muscle, which well established that we need to preserve muscle. So the recommended amount of protein, it increases also as you age. But a lot of times what I find is that it's very hard for women, especially if they are of the generation of the Jenny Craig or eating like a bird. It's very hard to make that big jump for a higher protein intake from the get-go. So anywhere between 1.5 to 2 grams per kilo, that would be the ideal. You can push it to about 2.2, but anywhere between 1.5 to 2 would be perfect. So that's my first tip. Prioritize protein with every meal. Then tip number 2 is focus on strength training. We have lots of cardio bunnies, lots of people that are focusing on their runs. And listen, cardiovascular health, amazing. But especially as we age, if we're not eating enough protein and with the hormonal changes and the high impact of running, if not being supported by good nutrition and by a strength training, it can impact your bones, especially because as we age, our bones start to become more frail because of the hormonal change. So it is not uncommon for us to have someone who is in their 50s or 60s come to us because they had some kind of like bone fracture from overdoing with the running, because now they're carrying more weight. And then what has worked for them always has been to just run. But now they're not eating enough protein to support muscle mass. Their hormones are changing the bone maintenance, and they are running, carrying a lot more weight than they normally would, which each stride with the added weight is going to have much more impact on their joints and on their bones. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I'm not saying that running is bad, but if you have to pick between cardiovascular activity and strength training, especially as you age, 100% is strength. Like we talked about before, the muscle mass is going to be declining, and it is crucial to preserve lean muscle. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. 2 to 3 strength workouts a week. If you can do more, great. But starting with 2 to 3, 20 minutes, perfect. Focusing on compound movements, squats, deadlifts. I would highly encourage you to work with somebody who knows what they're doing so they can program something for you where you're going to be able to make a better use of your time, especially as we age. It's almost like it's a run against the clock, especially if you have not really focused on strength training. It really is a matter of maximizing the time that you have. And if you're not really sure what that's going to look like, I highly recommend working with a fitness professional that is well-versed in working with women in perimenopause, menopause, with the hormonal fluctuation, and also that somebody that understands your lifestyle. Because, whenever we're 20, we're perfectly okay with starving ourselves. And then we have a six pack, and then we can still show up and go to work, even if we're eating nothing. I don't know about you, but if I try to eat nothing, I'm done. Like I have nowhere to pull energy from. So just another thing to keep in mind as well. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3, like you're probably going to want to punch me in the face whenever I say this, but don't. Stay with me here. But it is incredibly important to prioritize quality sleep. Sleep is key for hormonal balance, recovery, and also to regulate your appetite and regulate your hunger and hormones. And I don't think I have to say this, but I'm going to say it, that poor sleep will increase cravings and will increase how lethargic you are and you don't want to do things. So I know that it sounds, especially if you're having hot flushes, especially if you are struggling to sleep, I know it sounds easier said than done, but what are the active steps that you can take to improve your sleep, even if it is just a little bit? Can you maybe, improve your bedtime routine by not having any blue light, screen, TV, cell phone for 30 minutes to an hour before bed? Maybe that can help your sleep. Maybe have a wind down routine, have a cup of tea or sit in the dark for a bit or meditate, whatever that is. Can you create some type of wind down routine that can help you sleep? And I'm going to repeat time and time again. I understand that it is a lot easier said than done for a lot of people, but what are the things that you can do that can help you improve your quality of sleep? So that's tip number 3. Now we're going to go to tip number 4, which is almost like a piggyback on tip number 3, which is managing stress with mindfulness and relaxation techniques. And listen, I'm very extra, if you haven't noticed. So I'm stressed out a lot. And sometimes I'm just stressed out for no reason, but I digress. But I'm very high achieving. I like to get shit done. If I have to stay up all night working, I will. But I started to notice that whenever I was in a constant state of stress, trying to control the things that were kind of out of my control, it impacted my sleep. It impacted my training. It impacted my nutrition. So slowly, I started to get back to doing yoga, which there are some of the yoga classes that I do that there will be some part of meditation that is 10, 15 minutes long, which never in a million years I thought that I would be able to do it. And I can really notice a difference on the quality of my sleep, on the quality of my lifting sessions, on the quality of my stress management as a whole. So really do what you can to manage your stress. And obviously, I do understand that sometimes your career is very stressful. I get it. But what can you do to manage stress? You might be turning off notifications for work after a certain time. Because one thing that I find with a lot of our members is that their quality of sleep is impacted because you're working and answering high stress emails until right before bed, and it's hard for them to switch off. So in addition to having the hormonal changes that impact sleep, there is also the external factor of career or life decisions that need to be made that for some reason, listen, I'm talking to myself too here, okay? We decide to do like right before bed. So what can you do to manage stress better? Because the thing is that chronic stress is going to impact your sleep, your hunger hormones, your physical activity. Like I said, I like doing yoga, but there are things that you can do at home. You can find meditation on YouTube. There are some apps that you can use as well. If you have a Peloton, Peloton has on the app, they have some meditation classes as well, and you can pick the time. There are other apps on the App Store that you can use, but if you have a Peloton and if you have YouTube, that is plenty. You can definitely find something there and start small, 5 minutes, and build it from there. Then tip number 5, keep an eye on caloric intake and adjust as needed. So this is a kind of two-pronged situation. I love that people have been focusing on healthier food choices. I actually have a podcast about the idea of healthy. I'm going to put the link on the show notes, but you might want to listen to that one. So we have people that are focusing on healthy diets and I want to eat healthy and I heard that this is healthy and I'm going to do this. but they forget that even healthy foods have calories. So even if you are eating incredibly healthily, but you are over consuming calories, that is going to impact your weight gain. It just is. And staying mindful of portions and hunger cues can make a huge difference. Are you catching yourself snacking at night and just eating to eat? Like you grab a bag and then you're just like emotional eating, or you're coping with stress with snacks, or you're always on the pendulum swing of extremes. You completely cut your calories and you cut carbs and you cut everything. But then and then you cannot sustain that. And then whenever you have it, you go off the rails. We need to analyze that, because even if you are kind of quote unquote starving yourself for 3 days a week, but then for the other 4 days, you're going off the rails, the net amount of calories that you're consuming in a week is going to put you in a caloric surplus, which by default is going to make you gain weight. So being intentional about how much you're eating. And we need to talk about the whole idea of the under eating, because a lot of people think that, oh, I'm not losing weight because I'm not eating enough for my metabolism and blah, blah, blah. But more times than not, what happened is that they are under calculating how much they're actually eating, or they are under eating for a number of days, like let's say 3-4 days, like the example that I used. But then it's like, oh, I've been so good on Monday. I've been so good on Tuesday. I've been so good on Wednesday. And then Thursday, you start to become a bit less diligent. And the next thing you know, you're quote unquote rewarding yourself for being quote good for a few days, but then you end up over consuming calories. So being intentional about how many calories you are consuming and adjust as needed, because even healthy calories or healthy foods can put you in a caloric surplus. Oh, but I'm having nuts. Yes. Have you tried to turn the label and look at how many calories they have? Yes, they're healthy, but if you eat a bunch of them, you're going to be on a significant caloric surplus because they are very calorically rich. So that's tip number 5. Now we're going to go to tip number 6, which is increasing your daily activity, which we are going to call it NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. A lot of people become very reliant on the amount of calories that they burn during their workouts, either by relying on their smartwatch, which, by the way, can be up to 100% inaccurate. Yes, 100% inaccurate. So don't look at the number of calories burned in your smartwatch on your workout, because it's probably lying. But then the rest of the day, they have a very sedentary life. But the reality is that the amount of calories that you burn in your workout just accounts for about 5% of the total amount of calories that you burn in a day. So being intentional about daily movement outside of your workout is going to be incredibly important, because, there is a lot of talks about, oh, your metabolism slows down as you age. But there is research actually that supports that the weight gain that happens as people age, men or women, is not because of age, but is because of how sedentary people tend to get as they age. And it can be a number of reasons. In the case of women, it can be the impact of the hormonal changes because of menopause, and they're more lethargic and they don't want to do as much. So we can open a can of worms here. But the reality is that daily activity is one of the main reasons why people tend to gain weight as they age. It might be because you are in a career that is significantly more sedentary, which before, I'm going to use myself as an example. When I was in my 20s, I was bartending and doing personal training. So I was on my feet running around like a madwoman for hours, 4 or 5 times a week. Now, people think that because I'm a fitness coach that I'm, moving around, but because my business is online, the majority of my time is spent in a desk, 10 hours a day, I would say. So my life with my career has become significantly more sedentary. So I need to be very intentional about standing and doing chores and going for walks and doing things to keep me active instead of relying just on the amount of calories burned. Although I don't even like the idea of like looking at exercise for the amount of calories that it burns, because for me and for a lot of the ladies that I speak to, a big part of exercise is just like a mental peace that it brings. But it is important to incorporate some kind of movement, taking the stairs or setting a daily step goal to stay active, becoming intentional about going to the farthest bathroom or setting a timer to walk after you eat something, like intentionally becoming more physically active outside of the gym. And then tip number 7 is include fiber rich foods. That's another thing that I see on the extremes of like diet, especially for women in their late 40s, 50s, 60s, which is a generation that you was like, oh, let's be as skinny as possible. So you have the Weight Watchers, you have the Optavia, the Nutrisystem, the Jenny Craig, which had very little focus on quality of food and protein and having foods that were filling. And it was just like, let's eat as little as possible to be as skinny as we can be. And fiber is going to be incredibly beneficial to stabilize blood sugar, which can prevent overeating. It helps promoting satiety. It's going to help with digestion. In ways that you can do this is by incorporating veggies and whole grains and fruits. Oh my goodness. Yes, I said fruits. Anybody that tells you to stay away from fruits because of the sugar, run the other way, because I do not know what kind of fucking nonsense is going on in the fitness space that we're telling people to avoid fruits, which they're incredibly fiber rich. They're incredibly helpful to manage hunger and to help with satiety. Like, oh, but the sugar, oh my God, stop it. No. Fruits are not bad. Stop it. Okay. So start to incorporate fruits, vegetables. It's going to be good for your skin as well. It's going to help with bowel movements, especially if you have been struggling. That's something that I hear a lot with our ladies who are perimenopausal, postmenopausal, because, and this is me speculating, observation. There's no research that I am aware of that says this, but being working with women for 15 years, plus have worked with a lot of women who have had kids, pelvic floor health, have worked with a lot of women perimenopause and menopause. And as we age, our pelvic floor muscles are impacted. And what do pelvic floor muscles help you do? They help you poop. So if you are constantly constipated because you're not eating enough fiber, and your pelvic floor muscles are not working as they used to, and you're always constipated and straining, that is going to put unnecessary strain on your pelvic floor muscles to work extra because things are not moving as they should. And it can have negative consequences, especially because the hormonal fluctuation is not just going to impact the muscles on your abs, on your arms. It's also going to impact the muscles in your pelvic floor area, AKA your anus and your vagina. So again, this is me just following the logic. Having studied a lot about pelvic floor health, have done a lot of courses about pelvic floor health in menopause and understanding about perimenopause and hormonal changes, is just following the logic. If your muscles are being impacted, we cannot separate which muscles getting impacted. Your pelvic floor muscles are going to be impacted too. And if you are not eating a diet that helps with you going to the bathroom, you're going to be putting unnecessary stress in a muscle that is already kind of like fading away a bit. And it can come with a whole set of other issues that, again, this one I absolutely don't have data on, so I don't want to speculate, but I'm just following the logic. So these are the 7 tips that I recommend to getting and staying lean after 40. Tip number 1, prioritize protein with every meal. Tip number 2, focus on strength training. Tip number 3, prioritize quality sleep. Tip number 4, manage stress and mindfulness with mindfulness and relaxation techniques. Big fan of yoga, by the way. Tip number 5, keep an eye on caloric intake and adjust as needed. Tip number 6, increase your daily activity, aka your NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And tip number 7, include fiber-rich foods. I hope this episode was helpful. If you have been trying to get back in shape and you feel like everything that used to work no longer works, I got you, boo. This is literally what we help all our members in the Powerhouse Academy overcome every single day. That's literally what I hear on a daily basis. I don't know what to do because what I used to work no longer works. And as we can see, there are a lot of changes that happen with our bodies. And just because you knew how to get in shape in your 20s, it doesn't necessarily mean that those strategies will work now. Because, when you're 20, when you're, early 30s, you can get away with starving yourself and going for a run, and then poof, you lose 5 pounds. But then now reality is a bit different. And also you do not want to sacrifice muscle mass just for the sake of being skinny. So if you want to find out what you'd look like to have a plan done, especially for you and the whole support from our team, click the link down in the description. Let's schedule a Power Clarity call, and that's going to be with me. And then we can talk about your goals. I can understand a little bit better about where you are right now. And we put a strategy that is fully custom to you. Cool. Can't wait to chat with you. Hopefully we can put an awesome strategy for you together. And by the way, if I don't think that we can help you, I'll be the first one to say I'm very straightforward when it comes to that. I have no problem being honest about this because I'm a big believer that if I cannot give the result to somebody, that person is going to be my walking billboard. And if people come to them and they're not getting results and it's like, hey, who's your coach? And it's going to be like, it's Nathalia. And then it's not good for me either. So I'll be very transparent, very honest. Just schedule a call down below, fill out the questions on the application, and then we can have a conversation. And don't wait until the new year because the best time is always going to be now. I hope to chat to you again next week. Chat soon. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. But let me ask you, what was your aha moment in today's episode? I would love to know. You can leave me a comment at the link in the show description. You can also follow me on social media, Instagram. Links are down below as well. And let me know what topics you want to hear more about or who I should have on the show. This is it for today, guys. I'll see you back next week for another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast.